the main one is as a broker, you turn to insurers to find the answers. Those answers can be, well, what do you need to know? What do you want to know? What should you know? And what availability of cover is out there. And I think one of the problems that I saw was that no one had an answer to that. And for the most part, if there was an answer, it was always going to be negative. And as a result of that, and 2 years of being an underwriter specifically looking about the insurability of mass timber buildings, I realised that there was a better way, and that way was actually just stripping everything back down to the bare minimums and saying, okay, well, who has a role to play? What is that role? What information can they bring to the table? And then putting that together in a way that leads to an equitable outcome for all parties. Predominantly my work is with the developers, and to a lesser extent with the insurers and the brokers. Really, the insurance brokers and underwriters, that they know what they need. They need to know the details of the project so that they can price it, so that the broker can argue on the insured's, their client's behalf, for the best possible deal, but ultimately to come to a fair, equitable landing on what that policy should be. Now, you can't do that unless you have the information. And what we've noticed, certainly as an underwriter researching this, was that the information you need to price that risk is not forthcoming if you go about things in a traditional way. So the normal way that you would build a concrete and steel building doesn't work for mass timber. The assurances, the certainties, or perhaps not the certainties, the questions that need answering for an underwriter to price the risk correctly, and to give a level of cover that is relevant to that project, that information needs to happen much sooner. There's a theme that will be coming out about early engagement, and I'll say, yes, it's about early engagement, but it's about quality of that engagement. And that part of that is information, and then part of that is how you present it. And simply that sort of refers back to that breaking down of how we do things. It's how we used to do things when I first started my career. We had a hard market, and it would take months, many months, including international travel in some instances, to speak to underwriters around the globe and get them on board with a major infrastructure project. Like I did, for example, a Crossrail. Yes, they're big. Yes, the values are huge. Yes, the engineering is a challenge, but there's no different to a mass timber building. The engineering is a challenge. The safety of that project is a challenge, which is why you need to break it back down, get the information and present it at the right time to the underwriters to get an equitable outcome. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's the government, but we're trying to manage that. There's some excellent lobbying work going that started with the ASBP and is now continuing with Built by Nature, and I know that an excellent group of stakeholders across insurance, across architecture, across engineering, across fire risk engineering, are working towards lobbying the government to actually press for reform. Perhaps not reform, so to speak, but support. I think it would be unfair to say that the government is not willing. I think they are willing. We saw that from the outcome of COP, and we've seen that from the strategy that the strategy that they're employing going forward in 2022. But they could do a hell of a lot more. And I think that is the biggest barrier. I think personally they all want it to come like most responsible members of society. I think the better ones look at it as a challenge, just like I've mentioned Crossrail is open today, just like Crossrail would have been a major challenge from an insurance broking perspective. And any broker enjoys what they do, loves that challenge of taking something which on the face of it looks really difficult, close to impossible, and actually using the information available and helping the clients and the stakeholders in that project delivery team present that information in the right way. And in some instances, have to create that information. They haven't been asked before, and they need to provide it. And I think that they really do view that as a great challenge. However, I think that they are rightly incredibly frustrated that the response to UK insurers is as negative as it is. We work in a global insurance market here in London, and unfortunately and fortunately, what happens around the world is felt in the London and therefore the UK insurance market. We are, and I know brokers are being approached by clients who are multinational, who are finding no problems or limited problems in securing equitable insurance in North America or Europe with insurer X, but yet when the broker approaches insurer X in London for a UK project, it's an immediate no. The door is slammed in front of the face. And I think everyone can see a frustration with that, but if you're in the market, if you are a practicing broker, it's incredibly frustrating because there's no message to your client that will help, saying that insurer X won't do it, but yet your client is saying, well, that's rubbish, they're doing it for me in North America. That's madness. And I think there's something that the insurance community, particularly the carriers, really need to look at there, because it is, dare I say, unfair. The elements, the physics, the chemistry around the topic of mass timber is the same in North America and Europe as it is in the UK. So that's something that I think is up there with government or lack of government strategy around this is the second largest barrier to this. Data is key here, and it almost sounds obvious. But insurance is based on knowing how something performs. And with mass timber, we simply don't have the volume, whether it be in North America or Europe or anywhere else, that gives insurers the comfort to not have to delve much deeper into the risk dynamics and the parameters of a particular project. And that makes it very hard, because fundamentally that lack of data means a lack of projects, which means it's not paying your bills, it's not meeting your targets, it's not going to change your business in any given year. So then you have to put a lot more effort into looking at that risk and underwriting that risk when you're struggling to make a profit doing the traditional type builds and across both property and construction. So it's a very difficult landscape, very challenging landscape for an insurer just doing the day job. So to then put in something that has no data, that is obviously a volatile material, i.e. volatile insofar as we know timber burns, it produces a great strain on underwriters to be able to look at that. So in their defence, they do need that data, and it isn't there. The testing is one area that people like to look at. There is a lot of work going on around that. The STA are, I think it's true to say, quarterbacking, or certainly going to be the conduit for the results in an open source format. But again, with any testing, the parameters of the test are crucial. One can test for a particular outcome, perhaps. And I think that's where there's a little bit of a chicken and egg. We need more of these things being built. We need, therefore, to prove that a certain typology or methodology or system, when employed, is safe. But that takes time, and perhaps we don't have any at that time at the moment. Not if we're going to meet our net zero aims. Everywhere you go, when you start talking to the people who actually design and actually build these projects, you can tell there's brilliance and excellence. That no one sets off in the morning to go, I'm going to mess up today, I'm not going to do my job to the best of its ability. Well, some people do, but not everyone. And when you start scratching beneath the surface, the wealth of knowledge and expertise from people who are prepared to learn and who want to learn and who are inquisitive, which I'd like to think is the vast majority of the engineering and architectural community, to be honest. That what they're learning and what they know is fantastic. What they're not doing is sharing that knowledge. Not from a private, I don't want to share, but with insurers and with their brokers. Every time I've asked a question as to how do you do this, they've got the answer. And every time I've said, well, why aren't you telling? Well, no one's asked. Well, okay. I accept that. It's up to an insurer or your broker to ask you, but perhaps where they're not, that's where you need to guide them. You know more than anyone else here. You know, your experience on how to rectify issues, your experience on how to control moisture, your experience on how to rectify damage. This is all golden information that needs to be shared with insurers. Every time we've asked for, look, when it's gone wrong, give us examples of how it's been fixed. The walls come up. Now, I totally get confidentiality and so on, but we've got to be all in this together. It's every constituent part needs to play their bit to move this forward. And I think the construction industry as a whole just needs to get better at telling us how good they are, right? We're very quick to judge and say how bad they are, but there's all sorts of things that they're doing that they can demonstrate their quality. And I think that it's super important. A bit of patience is required there, which has not been something that they've needed in the past when it comes to purchasing insurance. And that goes back to that early engagement idea. But you know, just selling their story and being prepared to be open and being able to say, look, we don't know that, you know, and the fact that we know we don't know means we're going to find out, and that's super reassuring from an underwriter's perspective, because that gives you comfort that you're working with people who are going to solve a problem and solve that in a logical and the right way. It's very easy. I mean, I think that's why this has really got under my skin and a number of other people's skins, is because it is really easy, but we've all got to do something a little bit different, and that's the difficult part. It's like getting up early to go to the gym when you know you're over, you know what to do. You're just maybe not gonna go and do it. And until you get used to going and doing it, which is really hard at the beginning, then it becomes second nature, and then it becomes easy, and then you can maintain that throughout the life of whatever you're doing, and that's why I think a number of us in this area are so frustrated, because we can see it. We can see that just little tweaks to how you go about doing things, and everyone will go on that same journey with you. Yes, there'll be hiccups. Yes, there will be losses. We know that. The insurance market has no problem with paying losses, but they have massive problems with paying losses where you've not done your due diligence, where an underwriter has not done what he could have been reasonably expected to have done to be prudent. And that's where, you know, things need to happen differently, and that's where developers, architects, engineers need to really start opening up and saying, no, we'll take you on that journey, because we'll learn as well. Yeah, I think it does, and I think Grenfell, we have to talk about Grenfell, the horrible tragedy, and it's really changed the UK's perception on this, and you know, it's such a shame, because what was poor workmanship, fraudulent workmanship that led to what should have been a robust engineered solution if it had been erected correctly to prevent fire spread. And I think that sadly and ironically, given its man-made materials that led to the fire spreading, is really sad. And it's massively put us back. And I absolutely admit, for right reasons. You know, we have to ensure these buildings are safe. Any building is safe. But surely if we can ensure quality of workmanship, we can avoid these issues. If we can ensure testing and performance is adequately measured, and it is when it comes to mass timber, and we can look to other societies, other geographies for that. It's a real shame that we're in that situation, particularly given our need to reduce our CO2 emissions. So I think that's the biggest issue we have here. There is also, we need to look at the supply chain as well. We don't have a robust timber supply chain in the UK to match our mass timber ambitions. We will look to Europe for that, and Scandinavia, but they have plenty. And I think, yes, we have supply chain issues in general at the moment, but I'm fairly sure that we all know they will pass. So we have to look at that. That doesn't necessarily help, given we haven't got that homegrown nature. I should caveat, in the US, they have an unbelievably well-funded timber lobby group. They're used to building out of what we would call frame in the insurance world, which is really 4x2 stick built. They're also used to them burning down a lot, certainly during construction, which doesn't help, by the way. And that's, if anyone Googles that, they'll find significant losses every 6 to 12 months in the US market. But they have volume. They have volume and data. There's enough premium. They know that the market knows that these things happen. So again, we have the Grenfell issue, which is entirely right to due process and understand that to prevent it from happening. We have a supply issue, but it's not, whereas conversely, if you go to Scotland and Wales, there's a lot of timber being used, a hell of a lot more than I think a lot of people realise. And then we have just the I guess the wider money that somewhere like the US or Scandinavia will use, whether it be government incentives and views, or whether it be just the commercial sector. Yeah, in the UK, absolutely. I think when I started the underwriting journey a couple of years ago on the mass timber research, we found that actually from a risk perspective, there was some excellent work already done. And I think the prime one is the STA 16 Steps to Fire Safety. And that's a direct result of actual events, the learnings. It's a great example of how we do learn from our mistakes. That's meant that from a construction perspective, it was a long journey for us to launch the UK's first mass timber construction insurance facility. Sadly, that's now that no longer exists because there was no volume. We had no one actually asking us for quotes apart from a handful. So there is an interesting, is there how much interest is out there? But one of the issues was that long-standing relationships and market relationships are unequal. So, and certain brokers would go and do certain things, but they'd get insurance. They'd get insurance on a construction, and they certainly are. I would say to anyone now, you can get a construction insurance policy. No problem. You need to do things in a slightly different way, and you need to be more open with information. But it is absolutely available, and I think two to 3 years ago it really wasn't. The remaining issue is with property insurance, and that I think we have not seen a big change, and that I think is the most frustrating because, but we need to temper that frustration. And a lot of developers and owners will say, well, okay, I can get an actual construction policy now, but in 3 to 4 years' time, what will my property insurance policy now? And quite frankly, they will not get an answer, and any answer will be negative. Now, we need to then take a step back there, if you're a developer, and say, well, I can't get a price for my car insurance or my household insurance for 3 years. And why are you any different, right? And no underwriter will give you that price because, one, they're not allowed to, and they're not allowed to because the market changes for good and for bad in those intervening years, and therefore the price will change. So no one is going to commit to that. So that then we have to start looking at, well, what's the driver there? Where's the commercial driver? Well, like I said, we all have a part to play here, and maybe the developers and the owners have a part to play here to say, okay, right, what's our worst case scenario? Can we afford that? Can a potential buyer of this property afford that? And if the answer is yes, well, let's crack on, because then it comes back to data, and then it comes back to experience, and then it comes back to, well, we've answered those questions, we've got more of these buildings, and the price will come down. That is inevitable. So we are further forward, but I think certainly from an insurance on the property space, we need a lot more work. We need insurers to be a lot braver with qualified data, right? And they can do that. And we need developers and owners to be way more braver, to perhaps not expect insurers to just take their balance sheet issues, to maybe look at more effective and inventive ways of managing those balance sheet issues, so that they're not just all risk transferred to an insurer who will not take on what you yourself would perhaps not take on. So strip those away, and then you'll find there's an excellent relationship that you can build. I don't think we're there yet, but I have a feeling, I think the tea leaves are sort of indicating, I think we're at the cusp of that. And I think more than ever, the conversation is now being had. We have some thought leadership events coming up being hosted in the Lloyd's building, which is great. Not just a room, as in they're providing more than that. They're now really looking at this to be something that they need to get more involved in as a thought leader. And if that doesn't mean that they will push insurers to do something, that's not how they operate. That's not how the market operates. But it's that old analogy of leading a horse to water. They are just building the trough, all right? And that's what we all need to do. And much more of that is happening now, much more. I'm very, I think the insurance market will always adapt and change. So if you are of the belief that it's the insurance market that's the problem, then be confident that will change. My view is that actually it's government and the developers and the owners that need to take more responsibility here. We've mentioned that the government's policy is sort of maybe not fast, but it is certainly changing towards the use of mass timber, and obviously we've mentioned Grenfell and the obvious effect on that, rightly the effect of that. And then with the CO2 emissions net zero COP26 having been in this country, and so I think we're going in the right direction of that. And then finally, I think the developers, I think they're seeing that they've got more of a role to play here, not just in saying, well, we're doing, you've got 4 weeks to get me an insurance policy, please. That doesn't work anymore, right? And taking people on that journey, as we mentioned, they're now understanding that. They're also putting their money where their mouth is with regards to exploring alternative risk transfer mechanisms, which I'll just leave it at that. But that's really encouraging because the people who are actually wanting to buy the insurance policies are exploring ways of being brave enough to help with that insurance themselves, which fully exposes their balance sheet. So that there's some great, there's lots of great little bodies of work going on. There's some wonderful coordination being done by a handful of organisations with regards to thought leadership in this space. And then obviously you have the Built by Nature Accelerator Fund, which is relatively new and is doing great work in advancing the use of timber in the built environment. So I'm hopeful, just like with all those little factors and little aspects all doing their part, that then everyone else is starting to understand that they have a part to play in this as well, whether it be the developers, whether it be the structural engineers, the fire risk engineers, the architects, the contractors, the specialists and the non-specialist contractors, and then ultimately the insurers and the insurance brokers, and advancing all of our knowledge. I'm very confident that we will see widespread adoption of this, certainly in the next decade. That would be, I'd put my hand up and say I think by 2030 we'll have very few problems that we have, well, very few of the problems that we have today. We have all learnt about CO2 and the effects on the environment. Whether or not you are a believer in that or not, let's just think about using sustainable products in our built environment. It makes more sense to use a tree that we can grow than to use resources out of the ground that we can't replace. That seems good business sense to me. So even if you're the most ardent non-climate change sort of skeptic capitalist or whatever, or non-capitalist, it doesn't mean that you are one or the other, you can see that good business would be to have something, to use something for and sell it for a profit that you can grow back. So that will happen. And if we come back to data being a major issue, by 2030 we'll have more data, just end of, simple. And by that stage, ESG, when it comes from the corporate sense, from both insurers and investors, and a need to be much more engaged and actually do actionable, auditable things around ESG, EU taxonomy, which we are fully a part of in the UK. There is a lot coming, which means that everyone should be jumping on this bandwagon, and everyone should be doing their part to learn, to understand what we're talking about here, to understand the risk, understand how it's mitigated, and be able to provide an equitable solution. But everyone has a part to play, and that goes back full circle to why I'm doing this.